Hi, I'm Diana Solís, and welcome to our CHARLA. I'm with Martin Sorrondeguy and with Sandra Oviedo here in Chicago. We are doing video CHARLA about ourselves, our lives as photographers, as queer photographers in Chicago, and our work and what we've been doing over the years and our current projects. My work in particular lately is working with portraiture, and I'll be coming out with a small photo book soon, a limited edition photography book based on the last 2 years of photographing in the community in Pilsen. This is where I'm from. I mean, this is where I've been living most of my life. I'm just really excited that we were able to get together to discuss our work, our lives. Each of us work with very specific communities. Obviously also the Latinx community in general, but also queer community, trans community, and punk community. And so here we are. Thank you for being here with us.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Hello everyone, my name is Martin Sorrondeguy. I'm a photographer, artist, and musician. I was the vocalist for Los Crudos, Limperis, and numerous other musical projects. I was born in Montevideo, Uruguay, and was raised in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago. Thank you, Diana, for inviting me to be a part of this charla. This is amazing. I am honored to be here with Diana and Sandra as well. It's been really a nice experience to get to sit together and to talk about our work and our histories and the whys behind what we do and the work we create. And I hope everyone enjoys what we put together for you all.
Hola, my name is Sandra Oviedo, aka ColectivoMultipolar, and I am sharing here my story about documenting our story and my work with Tropiteca here in Chicago. I'm a photographer, original from San Luis Potosí, Mexico, and I live in Chicago. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy this conversation, esta charla, esta conversación, and thank you.
I'm a photographer and a visual artist. Most of my work, I have been working in photography since the late 70s, mid to late 70s, till about 2000, 2001, 2000. And I took a good break to pursue illustration and painting. I recently have returned to photography during the onset of the pandemic in 2020. My work has been mainly photojournalism. In fact, the three of us are primarily documentary photographers and portraiture. I work for several magazines and newspapers in Chicago as well as in Mexico City. And my work has focused on the Latino community, Latinx community here in Chicago, the LGBTQ community in Chicago and in Mexico City, respectively, and also the feminist movement, the early years in the 1970s of women's lives and the feminist movement here in Chicago. So anyway, I'd like to turn it over to Martin.
I was born in Montevideo, Uruguay, and I was raised in the Pilsen community in Chicago. I do a lot of documentary style work, but not solely documentary, but through my travels with my bands, Los Crudos and Limperis, I've had the opportunity to really focus in on the punk scenes globally, and that's including the queer punk scene and Latino or Latinx punk scene, Chicano punk scene, and a lot of my work centers around that. And I've been working in photography since, I don't know, a long time. It's been a long time.
Probably since the 80s, really.
Since the 80s, yeah, definitely.
And I've been working in photography since the mid 70s to about 2000. And then recently retook it again in 2020 and haven't stopped. It feels like this is a very casual conversation amongst, three queer photographers, Latinx queer photographers from Chicago, who combined, the three of us combined in terms of the years that we've been working. I mean, I worked as a photographer for over 20 years. Martin also, and then you, who's been working in photography how long?
Well, let's see. Let's say that since 2016, I've been documenting Tropiteca. My first time in Chicago is when I was 18. I was just barely 18 years old, and my first it wasn't actually in the summer because my birthday is in June. I'm a June Cancer, so it's on. I went to the Pride parade.
Was this in 2016 that you?
Oh no, that's way back.
Oh, way back.
I'm not
ancient.
I'm not that young. But so that was my first time here in Chicago, and during that summer, and I think it was 2001, the summer of 2001, and I was just barely also coming out as a lesbian. You know, at that time I didn't know the word queer, really. I was like, oh, I think I'm, you know, lesbian because I'm attracted to this person that I was studying theater. And so my first time here in Chicago was in that summer, and I started connecting with people, but not completely with the people that I hang out now or that I admire now. That happened years later. And so my relationship with Chicago has been like back and forth
between Mexico
and Chicago. And then I just in 2016 I came back and started documenting. It's a party, but it's more than a party, right? It's a production duo, but also it's how you will say, I don't know.
So the way I met you, the way I understand about your work, and one of the things that I've been doing, of course, has been following Sandra and this is very interesting because it's a great story. ColectivoMultipolar, and I saw the work and I thought, wow, who is this collective? I thought that's doing this great work documenting LGBTQ and trans nightlife in alternative spaces with a duo called Tropiteca, right, all over the city. And so I started following ColectivoMultipolar on Instagram, and all of a sudden I get an invitation from Latitude Lab in Chicago, where Sandra was doing a residency, and they said, oh yeah, well, Sandra wants to know, Sandra Oviedo from ColectivoMultipolar wants to know if you would like to come and do like a mini critique, with her work. She's finishing her residency. I said, oh my God, it'd be an honor. I thought, I loved their work. I didn't know, I figured she was the main person in the Colectivo. So I arrived on the day that we had set up the meeting and the studio visit, and I find out that it's only one person. It's not many people.
It's a collective of one.
Of one. So maybe I want to talk a little bit about that. Why? I mean, I'm interested in finding out from two of you, like, why certain things about you and how you feel about your work. There's a lot of intentionality about your work, and I personally, feel that most of us, and as photographers and artists, that I feel that intentionality is key in terms of like producing and also doing one's work within a specific context, right? We are all connected in some way to communities, and these communities are connected more than ever today. So
I mean, definitely my interest in documenting Tropiteca was, it's a project that is developed and produced by two women, right? Here in the South Side. They were looking for spaces to throw parties so we can, people can dance freely and don't be harassed, And so, all the clubs or the parties were happening mostly in the North Side. So I live in the South Side. They live in the South Side. They started creating these spaces. So that was the first thing, right?
Alternative spaces, right?
Yes, exactly.
That are not available to most of us. I mean, I think, like, as far as I've known, since I've been out since the 70s, the mid 70s, I feel like we have always, as queer people, have created our own spaces, right? And have thrived within those spaces, but also today there is sort of the the spectrum is really huge in terms of like how you identify and how people identify. But the fact is that spaces for queer people are still very limited, right?
I think there's numerous things going on. The theme around community. Community is constantly, the idea of community shifts and changes. And we have kind of stepped up to define our own communities. So we have the greater community that we grew up on the south side of Chicago, right? That we feel very identified with, but we also had to create our own communities. And I think that's been the beauty and the sort of catalyst of the work that we've created, is we're witnessing something, but we say, I think this is the moment that I need to pick up my camera right now, because there's something happening that if it's not captured, it frightens us, because our brains think in that way. And we go, oh, and I think, Diana, I see that in your work. I don't know what in the 70s possessed you, or early 80s, to go, take your camera to this marcha, take your camera to this party, this gathering.
I just, I want to say about that, because what's important for me is that my background as a photographer really started as a kid, looking at magazines like Life and Look magazine. I would literally, as a 10-year-old kid, I would look at these things and I would imagine myself being the photographer doing this kind of work. And I especially love the work that Margaret Burke White and others did, women photographers. I didn't see too many, so I was just really thrilled. And I kind of lived in this like fantasy of mine, was like, I want to do this. I want to travel all over the world. I didn't know a lot of kids in the community who did this, who had this, this idea. Your parents always said, oh yeah, you're going to go to college, or you're going to do this, or you're going to get married, that kind of thing. They never said, oh yeah, run off and be a photographer, But that stuck with me. And as I went through high school, I picked up the camera, thanks to a lot of reasons, to photographers from UIC, the University of Illinois Chicago, well, not at that time was called Circle Campus, came to Pilsen to teach photography to the, disadvantaged kids in the barrio. I was one of those, and my mom also encouraged me, and my dad actually. So that's how I got started. But the other thing that when I looked at these magazines, what they were doing was what we call photoreportage. And I was very attracted to that. I didn't just want to take cute or beautiful photographs of, still lifes. And I wanted to somehow be a part of where things were happening. And of course, as I grew up you grew up later in the 80s, I grew up in the 70s and 80s here. All of the struggles of the Latino community, I was an actual part of it, my family and myself. And that's how I met your mom. We were actually living what we were documenting, we were living through it. It was part of our lives. And so it seemed almost natural for me to take that camera and begin to document. I wasn't thinking of like, oh, I'm going to be a very famous photographer. I was thinking like, I had this like urgency where if I don't do this now, it's going to disappear. I even thought that back then, but it wasn't still clear yet. But that was kind of like the feeling. Okay?
In that part, I have an interview. I actually have a documentary that I can share the link right now. But I interviewed this performance artist, Kian Marcelo Juno, and one of the lines that they say in the documentary, they say,
what's important about documenting queer events and spaces is that they are so ephemeral, and they only happen that one time, and it's a moment of magic that may never happen again.
I always say I document or the celebration of life, right? Our life as a queer,
our stories.
Yeah, like documenting our stories is my ongoing project. And I really believe in that, celebrating our lives. We know, and I know, probably, you live that, the 80s, right? The 80s, all the people that you probably lost, right? In
Sure.
the 80s.
Yeah.
So celebrating
HIV
our,
and AIDS, yeah.
so like celebrating our lives. Every day is a constant. How is it? Resistance, right? Somos la resistencia. you
Yeah,
said.
every day is like it's a reminder, and it is, I think, for whether we say it out loud or not. Every day is we are the resistance. The reason I always say, also to my students, I say, we are the resistance because we exist.
Yes.
If we don't exist, there is no resistance. And if we don't speak out about how we exist and who we are, then we will also be erased. I know it sounds very bleak, but it is the truth. I think it is the truth. And I think that all three of us have had that, we lived through those experiences, you know. Martin and his work and being a queer punk, and you know, because for me, like when I think about being punk, I don't see the queer in there, you know, because the punk has been fetishized to a certain point in society, that it is like a real kind of macho thing, and it is like, you know, anti, you know, democratic almost. It can be, you know, but in fact, it is what? It is different, right? It is not that exactly.
Well, there's a few things I think I wanted to bring up, because Diana, you said something really important. You mentioned I didn't want to take pretty pictures.
Yeah.
The fact is, what we are involved with at some point was viewed as very ugly, and whether it was queerness or punkness. And I think there was something about that world that I go, it is beautiful. And in my eyes, it's beautiful. So this is what I choose to photograph, and this is what I choose to be a part of. I know we've been illed and, you know, gawked at or made fun of or messed with throughout, you know, our coming up. But for me, I will tell this story, and for some people it may be a very ugly story, but from within we know and we recognize the beauty of it. And in terms of punk, you know, it does have this, you know, in the 80s it really kind of, forever it's been kind of viewed as this very aggressive sort of sub-scene, subculture, or whatever they want to call it. And, you know, it's been some of those spaces that I have felt my most comfortable. And it was, you know, whether it was in the straight world, there could be gay bars that I went to where I felt very uncomfortable. And that's something that people don't like to talk about. But as a Latino, as, you know, a queer punk, there were these mainstream gay bars that I go to, and I felt extremely awkward. And it was in these underground spaces that I felt like I could completely be relaxed. And I think there was something more than beautiful about that. And you know, what people may again view as scary, daunting, ugly, I go, oh no,
Aggressive.
no. I see something very beautiful here, and I want to be in it.
I think, go ahead.
No, like one of my mottos is love in the dance floor. You know, the most amazing people I ever met has been in the party scene. But in this kind of party, in this kind of dance floor, and I always say dance floor is therapy for me. And yes, I feel good. I feel community. I celebrate my existence, and you know, it's about the music. It's about the fun. It's about community. Yes,
community, right? I think I agree with both of you, because for me, some of the spaces that have been the most rewarding and important for me, and then mentally and physically, have been those kind of alternative spaces that were not your co-opted spaces, that were quote unquote like, here's this beautiful lesbian bar or a space we can get together and run by either mafia or corporation. It was the more underground places, or in even a church basement, because we used to, you know, like put spaces together. So, and the idea too is, I think like what happens is that within our existence as queer people throughout history, we have always created these spaces that were important to nurture us, you know, mentally, physically, you know, spiritually. They nurtured us. They weren't perhaps the prettiest of spaces at times, Does it have to be? I mean, yes and no. You know, I think it's, you know, that is like in the eye of the beholder, right?
We made them pretty.
We made them what they are for us so that we can feel comfortable who we are, that we can feel safe. I think that, you know, being safe is like one of the major things for all of us, depending on where we are on the spectrum, right? I mean, it's really important to feel that we have a space that we can feel safe in, and be who we are, be ourselves. And in photography, we cross boundaries. As queer photographers, for someone like me who has worked in photojournalism, there were times when I would have to photograph in a foreign country where I couldn't be queer, or, okay, I may have looked a little different, but I couldn't really, my job and my work were so focused on getting the story. For example, Los Pueblos Jóvenes, you know, the slum areas in Peru, and the women working there where the men had left and the women were building and doing things. And yet, if I were to have come out to all of these people, they wouldn't have really been welcoming, I think, for the most part. And it wasn't a struggle, I felt, in a way. I mean, there was, in a way, nagging. But the fact is that I didn't need to be like, wear a placard, you know, a big sign pasted on my forehead. I'm queer, look at me, I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. The fact that I was out here and doing the work I did, and people who knew they had that respect for me, was really important. And I didn't back down in terms of like what people in the community said. I lived my life as authentically as I could, in the community and outside of the community. You know, as queer artists and people, you know, how we come into spaces and work with others. We not just, I know I don't just work with the queer community, but maybe more so in the past than today. I work almost strictly with, you know, the Latino community and the community in general. My work is no longer focused on photojournalism, but it's focused more on portraits. I've always loved to do them. I never did them enough, I think, and I don't know why, but that's what I've returned to photography. Is working almost like on a very personal and intimate level with people, mm-hmm. on a one-on-one, and not just studio portraits, but also environmental and, you know, documentary style portraits. I mean, I'm so crazy for portraits right now that that's almost exclusively what I do. Basically, the idea that I had for when I returned to photography, mm-hmm. was not just documenting these walks in the changing landscape of Pilsen, because it's still in this heavy throes of gentrification. I thought of it and I said, what I really want to do is go back and photograph people that I haven't photographed in 20, 25, and 30 years. Mm-hmm. I want to make that into a project. Mm-hmm. I started out doing that and trying to track people down, and then I ended up starting to do pop-up portraits of people in the community, or that were close to the community, or had some kind of relationship with the community, and many of them turned out to be friends of mine, you know. So that's what's been happening with me. Yeah.
I find that when I go back and I look at my work, especially my early work, I wish I would have done more. So this is why I'm looking at you, Sandra, because you're in it, and I think, you know, I'm still in the worlds that I photograph, and it's like I'm making more of an effort now to try to capture more, and I know you can become that annoying photographer, but you know, we own it because I think, you know, when I look back at the work that I did 25 years ago, and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have photographed this person, I wish I would have taken a shot of this person. You're always going to have that. As a person who has a camera, you're always going to have a little bit of that, I wish I would have, you know, and this is something that I experienced. But when you're doing your work right now, Sandra, what is it that makes you go, snap, I'm going to take that photo?
Not attraction, but like if you want to do something with, you know, with that person in specific, it needs to exist deseo.
Tienes que tener un desire.
And it doesn't have to
Es
be,
como tener ganas, como dicen.
yeah.
Si no
And
tienes ganas, no
attraction,
pasa
but
nada.
it doesn't have to be, yeah, y no tiene que ser like, oh, you know, that sexual attraction or physical
Right,
attraction. No,
deseos, yeah.
it's desire of that person, of that universe, right?
Yeah.
It's how I perceive people, you know, like the universe, their world, like what they're doing, you know? And I really believe like the people that I choose to photograph is because I feel that desire, what they're doing in with their life.
Is it life for that moment as well? Because I see it in your work. There's certain moments I'm like, Sandra's right there, right now. She's taking photos of that.
That's another thing. Like I always, and this is something that I always believe, that if you're a photographer, right,
Mm-hmm.
like each of us, you are photographing your world.
Mm-hmm.
You're photographing what is part of you.
I think,
I don't think like I don't feel like a stranger.
Yeah, you're not sent by the Washington Post to come into a Native American community.
Yeah.
And it happens, and it has always happened that way. But most artists, I feel, have always lived that life that they're immersed in.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I know that it's true that I didn't separate a lot of this. That things that were happening to me, the reasons I got involved with the lesbian movement in Chicago, in Mexico City, in the feminist movement, was because I was as an active participant, but at the same time I was also documenting and working and feeling like, you know, I gotta do this march because this is like not gonna happen again, you know, or like it's just I gotta do it.
Do you feel welcome all the time? Because that's another question. Like, we also need to see
well,
how things
We're talking about access,
how
right?
things are having change,
Right.
and also like now
You have to have respect.
We have respect, you know, the privacy, and
You have to, yeah.
I photograph nightlife. You know, I'm sorry, but like nightlife is, and this is from a personal experience. Nightlife or the dance floor is where like you lose control.
Mhm.
You know, like you lose control. Like
You mean the people on the
you
dance floor?
yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, you know.
So what
And-
happens to do people ever tell you don't take my picture or they don't care or what?
I always was, or I am like, ask, you know, I ask, like, can I take a picture? Or like when, you know, when my friends from Tropiteca, they're organizing an event, they put that in the event,
Like a disclaimer?
we're gonna have a photographer, a videographer. If you don't want to be photographed, please let us know. And also now, you know, we provide, or parties provide like a wristband. So if you see it, don't photograph that people.
Right.
Because in our communities, again, like we're queer artists, right? But sometimes our families, our workplace, they don't accept.
I remember Michigan Women's Music Festival. We're talking the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking 76. I think it was like the third festival, if I'm not mistaken. And I went with a woman from Pilsen. We were like, and the two Latinas from Pilsen who were coming out. And then we met some other women I lived on the north side at that time and moved away from my community, from my home, so that I could have more freedom, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Then I came back and I said, I don't give a hell what anybody says. So at the Michigan Women's Festival, they had these stickers or badges that said, "Do not steal my image," and you knew that you couldn't photograph them. It's like the idea of the dance floor. Just because you're queer and you're a photographer, you're not welcomed everywhere. The fact that you have a camera is can be incredibly threatening, you know, to some people, right? And you need to have that respect with them, you know, to not be in your face and not be stealing their imagery. And that has happened to me when I documented, you know, the gay and lesbian movement in Chicago for, you know, probably over 8 years, you know, even during, you know, the dark moments, you know, the really terrible times of AIDS. In San Francisco and in Chicago, primarily in Chicago, how a lot of people, they wanted their pictures taken at that time. Some people, the ones who were really fighting against AIDS, you know, ACT UP and other people. Because the whole idea was that for us to be seen, to be known, to have, you know, the government and, you know, the city to know who we were and not have us be silenced. So you walk that fine line, I think, as a documentarian.
Mm-hmm.
You walk that fine line, but you also have enough sense, I hope, to know when and where you can and can't take a photograph.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's also this sort of, when you are a part of a certain scene or a community, there's a trust that gets developed.
Yeah.
And, I know that I can take pictures of some punks that nobody can walk up and be like, I'm going to take your photo. They'll tell you,
No.
get the hell away from me.
Yeah.
And I think, this is something that I've always sort of, always sort of thought about. I know I had professors in the past who literally told me, I'm really jealous of you because of the access you have.
Yeah.
And this is something that's
how you
beautiful.
get that access,
Well,
right?
this
Right.
is
Build
because
the trust.
we are participants. We are of that. So therefore, you can't just walk in with the camera and get the quality of work that we end up getting because we are a part of that scene or a part of that community.
Or we're trusted. You build trust.
Yes.
It's like the photographs I do, the portraits that I've been doing, a whole series, which, in fact, they'll be coming out as a book pretty soon.
Amazing.
The portraits are also, what I'm interested in is that moment, that intimacy that one has with a subject, whether they're friends or not, you have that trust with them, and that person relaxes. I'm very interested in that whole process of what happens, me looking at them looking at me. What happens in between that space? I'm interested in that. It sounds kind of like out there, but that's what I'm interested in. And how do I navigate and move around this space of the person in front of me, right? Or I'm shooting them from an angle, whatever. How do they allow me to do and take their photograph and become comfortable? And in most of my work, that when I edit it and I look at it, I notice that the work that doesn't feel right, that doesn't work, is when the person is not feeling it.
Yeah.
It's like spoiled milk almost. It's like it doesn't make for a good photograph. No matter how beautiful your lighting is, no matter the location, if the person is not feeling it. And something happens, I think, in portraiture, that when you reach that point where the person opens up to you, a lot of things happen, a lot of emotions.
Is there a specific photo, a specific moment that you remember? Like, it's like, oh, that photo, that moment, that conversation, like that situation that you remember, like one of your most iconic photos for you. Do you have one?
I have one. Yeah, one or two. I have. Well, one of the most iconic in terms of like marches is the one where Rudy Lozano died. He was a community union organizer, and he was assassinated. I was there shortly after it happened. I was there with, I believe it was someone from the Reader Day, and I was also in pain and mourning because I knew him personally. And they held a march for him, a memorial. There's this one particular photo that a lot of people really want all the time, and I love it.
I love it too.
It's the photograph of them marching down 26th Street, and the guy looks like a pachuco, one of the guys in the front of the line, wearing the suspenders and the baggy pants, and it's a very iconic photograph. That was like a very personal moment too for me, actually. What are people doing now? What are you all doing? I mean, what kind of projects? What are you working on?
Sandra, ¿por
qué no empiezas?
Well, I just finished the Latitude Art Residency.
They're a lab, right? A lab, community
Photo
lab.
lab.
That's
a
a
community
yes.
photo lab.
Every year they open this
A call for artists.
una residencia artística, like
Yeah,
like
residency.
like every year. So I actually applied in 2019. No, 2018, and my residency is supposed to start in November 2020, but
Pandemic got in the way.
COVID happened, and I start in November 2021, and it was amazing time. I really want to finish my book, and it's about Tropiteca. Right now I'm working in a documentary. It's called Las Mamis, and it's about 5 mothers of queer artists and activists. I want to explore some questions
That's
with
a great
them.
project. Yeah.
Martin?
In terms of projects that I'm doing, I think like a lot of artists, our brains are kind of like going in a couple different places. So, I've been offered to do another photo book, which a friend in London wanted to put out. I'm always, that would be my 4th book. So I'm just a little hesitant on just slapping something together. I really want to be intentional about what I put out there. So that's one project. I'm doing several musical projects still. I have a newer musical project in Chicago called Canal Irreal. We will be recording a new album in the spring. I am still working on my electronic project that's titled Nerve. It's NRRRV, and I'm working towards completing some music with that. I'm a big fan of the fanzine and putting zines out and things like that. So I do a zine called Susto. I'm going to do a new issue of that, and it's a large format silk screen photograph poster that's folded down, and it's turned into pages.
Are you printing that locally, or
I print it myself.
you print it yourself?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I thought maybe you were working with like Hoofprint, which is like really a really cool place.
It is. I do it myself because I have the setup for it.
That's
So
right, you told me.
yeah. So
Oh my God, that's so amazing.
I'm doing that. I may also publish a zine of all the punk flyers that I've made over the last 20, 30 years.
Almost 30 years. Yeah, I saw some of them at your home.
So I may do a zine about that as well. So there's a couple projects I've got. I've also been writing some short stories as of late. So working on a few things.
Yeah.
Amazing, Martin. How about you, Diana?
Wow, I just, what you're all talking about, it really resonates with me because, one, especially Sandra's project, Las Mamis, many years ago in the 80s, I did a project called Mothers and Daughters, Madres y Hijas, and it was funded by the University of Illinois Graduate College, and I got a scholarship. It was a summer scholarship, in part research and in part, my photography. So the whole deal was you had to partner up with a professor, as your advisor, and it was a great project, and I thought about that a lot. But my ongoing project is the work that I started out in 2020 with, to continue to do the daily walks. That's one called This is Pilsen, but the other one is, there's 3 projects really right now. The other one is the continuation of its ongoing, photographing people that I haven't photographed that are still alive. Some we have lost people as time has gone by that are my age or older that I want to photograph them. Not so much to do like a comparison then and now, but in a way yes, but it's a little more involved because it deals with interviews and talking to people. I'm not sure how that's going to culminate exactly yet. I have like this urgency to find them and photograph them and reconnect. And so far I've been reconnecting with those people. It's been amazing. Some of them are friends, some of them are acquaintances, many of them are artists, visual artists, writers, and photographers. And the third project, which is much more current and going to happen very soon, is that because I came back to photography very recently, almost 2 years ago, a lot of the work has garnered a lot of attention, not just my older work, but this current work. And 3 Arts is an organization that is a nonprofit that helps artists and that provides assistance, technical assistance, and also grants for artists to do creative projects. And I happened to be one of the people who won when it was nominated for one of the awards. It was the smaller award, but that award gave me the possibilities to keep working and buying some equipment to keep working on these projects. And then the Three Arts approached me with doing their 3AP project, which is a crowdfunding campaign to do a creative project. And my friends have been nudging me to put together a zine, a zine of my photography. It's turned into a little more than a zine, so it's going to be a limited edition book that launches in April, 100 pages with text, with a foreword and an introduction about the return. And basically it's a personal journey. It's not a diary of sorts, but it's a personal journey. It's taken into account in context all the years I have worked as a photographer, over 25 years in the past, and then bringing it up to speed with the work that I've been doing the last 2 years, which culminates in the personal work of working in portraiture and photographing and documenting people in the community.
There is a color project that I worked on some years ago. It started, I'd say about 25 years ago. It started with punks and their parents. And it's in color.
Related.
And in the 2000s, I started a lot of my queer friends with their parents, like predominantly some drag queens and some trans people with their parents. And it's called Miss, Mister. And it was this kind of bringing back, I have always had this thing about otherness that has always come up in my life whenever we filled out applications for stuff, because we were from Uruguay. They'd say, are you this Latino, that Latino, or are you other? Other. And, are you this, are you that? Other. And I've always, I embrace other. I love other. I love being another because me siento que I don't want to give it all away to you. I'm gonna embrace it. Let's take otherness. I don't think everything needs to be handed to everybody. There should be some level or part that is a mystery or that requires some question or conversation. I'm okay with that. I take it. So I think that was the idea with that project, and it's in color, and it's this whole idea of like bringing the others and this kind of weirdness, queerness, freakness, weirdo, bring it back to the roots, right? And bring it back home. And that was something about bringing my friends with their parents that was very interesting to me, because I've always been so connected to my parents. As a punk, I didn't completely reject and rebel my parents, where some people did. I didn't want to. I didn't want to.
So yeah.
I think all of us are either currently or have worked on the issues of like the other or family, chosen family. I'm very interested more in. Well, I've been very interested for a while, but I haven't really stepped up to the plate in my work because I just started photographing again. I could have said, and I did want to start a project on chosen family, because a lot of my friends, including myself, I think that inevitably comes up in being queer. The whole idea of family, not so much the nuclear family, the idea of family, that it is not what we were raised to be, especially at my age. I'm in my late 60s. That whole idea of what is family was really drummed into us. And if you weren't part of that, forget it. You were lost, If you didn't have your own family, if you're a woman, or a man, if you didn't, have a family. We broke, I think the three of us have broken all those molds many times over. And we're not the only ones. The people that we work with, we deal with, we party with, we have connections to, have broken those molds as well. But at the same time, we create and we form families, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not your typical or stereotypical family. We form families. Even though I can tell you right now that I think chosen family has been really what's also very important to me. And to maintain that and to let other young queer people know that that's okay. You can do this. You can have this family. This is yours. It's open to your interpretation, to your life, And I think a lot of people need that,
Well, thank you so much for inviting us, Diana.
Yeah, thank you.